した霧街の明かりがぼやけてる理解できぬ何も見えぬ静かな街の声が
Hi everyone out there, welcome to the first episode of the AI Hype podcast, where we talk about the hype around AI. My name's Adi Balachander, and I do strategic partnerships and product marketing for First Wave AI. I'm joined by my colleagues Phil Worthen and Christian Hyland. Phil, Christian, I'll let you two introduce yourselves.
Yeah, thanks, Adi. Like you said, I'm the founder over at First Wave AI. We're building some cool customer service tools. And prior to this, I was with AWS as a product manager on the Elastic Compute Cloud side of it, and did some work with Ernst & Young prior to that. Glad to talk about AI and what's going on with SDRs.
Hey, I'm Christian, co-founder here with Phil, also building at First Wave AI, heavy focus on operations and growth. Before this, been in the tech space in a lot of client consulting type roles, everywhere from Coinbase to Accenture to a contributor in kind of layer one crypto projects. So I've been sort of all over the place.
Thanks for those introductions. So kind of starting with one of the first things we brought up at that introduction, the hype. We're hearing a lot about AI SDRs and if they can really do it all. Now, both of you have some great experience working with partners and clients, and I'd like to get your perspectives on unpacking that hype around sales development representatives and if they're going to live up to the promises that we've seen from the internet and media.
AISDRs are super hot right now. Looking at some of the larger new players in this space, places like 11x, Artisan, and AI SDR, they've all raised quite a bit and have some impressive ARR for early stage companies. In the case of 11x, they recently closed a Series B. They're securing $50 million. They had a Series A at $25 million raised and a seed round where they raised $10 million. So they've raised quite a bit. Notable investors, including A16Z, SV Angel, and others. You have other places like Artisan also have raised money, including $7.3 million. More recently secured by Oliver Zhang. And then finally, you have places like AI SDR that have also raised recently. So you have a lot of fundraising in the space, which is showing quite a bit of interest. And in terms of revenue, 11x has reported 10 million in ARR, so showing significant growth of their quote unquote digital worker. And others like AI SDR, while not releasing their ARR figures, have reported 4x increases in revenue during 2024. So lots of growth, lots of interest, lots of hype in the space.
Yeah, I think like in general, everybody played around with ChatGPT, a few years ago, and they're like, holy smokes, this thing this is like a game changer. And now you have all these folks that are focusing on industries and job specialties that maybe ChatGPT can try to like disrupt and change and transform. And based off of that, AI SDRs, that's like one of the hottest things that you could throw ChatGPT at and hope that it succeeds. So it kind of makes sense, these wild valuations.
Yeah, and I wonder if it also ties into cultural trends, because we were speaking to like a prospective client the other day in sort of the, let's say, entertainment venue space, and he noted that a lot of these venues they have a lot of trouble hiring for outbound cold callers. That you'd used to get someone young, fresh out of college, but maybe generationally people are less interested in those types of roles. I mean, granted, it's one company, so maybe that's just that person's opinion. But I wonder if there's something where there's a need for this, but there's not necessarily as easy to get the talent to do sort of those initial sales outreach for these companies that need to reach thousands and thousands and thousands of people a day.
It's interesting, like reactions that people are having to AI, there's like the two ends of the spectrum where, you know, it's a really happy reaction or it's a really negative reaction. And so like on the happy side, you have a lot of people, I mean, I'm probably on the happy side where, you know, I see Star Trek and I'm like, oh, that's such a cool future. Like, I think AI can push us towards that future where, you know, we're achieving the utmost of the human experience kind of a thing. And there's some people who also see it, you know, more the happy side where, you know, sales is not an easy task, right? It's very difficult to do well. It's very hard to do cold calls. It's very hard to do lead generation or even lead research. And so, you know, if it's possible to throw AI at it, I can see people who are excited about that prospect. You know, it can take away some of the hard, difficult parts of the job. And then on the negative side, it's not just the negative side of like people who are like, oh, AI is going to take our jobs. There's like a negative side of like people just don't want to interact with AI. I think we've all had horrible experiences dealing with like the robots from the 1990s and 2000s, the 2010s, where you're talking to a robot and you're like, you know, it gives you an option of three places to you know, forward your call to, and you're like screaming at it because it doesn't understand what you're saying, and you're like having to repeat yourself over and over. So I think that's carrying over to this new post LLM AI that we're dealing with now. So, you know, as far as like customer reactions, it can run the full gamut, or client reactions, like when we give our initial pitches, and then on the SDR side, again, run the full gamut of people who are excited about it and people who are just like, they just don't want it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, to echo Phil's point, you know, listening to call logs for one of our receptionists, one of our locations, you know, there's people that they're so used to those robocalls, those obnoxious robocalls that you get, that they get an AI, they want to move beyond it, right? So there's like a call I listened to the other day, and the person's just like, I want to speak to a human, and then they get the front desk, and all they ask is, what's your address, right? And our AI is using, you know, 11 Labs, it's using OpenAI, like it could have answered that like very quickly. The person like wanted to skip the AI to get on hold, to wait for a person to give them the address, right? Because people have had kind of interactions with these very unsophisticated, you know, AIs or robocallers, etc., that they're just kind of trained to want to get beyond them, right? And I do it too. Like if I call my bank, I'm just like yelling human until I get past it, right? So, you know, there's that.
I just dial
too.
0 over and over and over. If it's a real human on the phone ever, they're just hearing like beep, 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 beep as I try to get the operator.
But, you know, all joking aside, I think we've seen, you know, some kind of pretty honest reactions on Reddit and X. So, you know, there's a post that on X in, you know, the last, let's say, year, and it's a person posting in the SaaS subreddit saying, you know, they're looking for experiences with AI SDR companies, such as 11X and others, and you know, there's just a lot of negative reactions. You know, one user saying they use one of these platforms, they sent 1,400 emails, they got 0 responses. Similar things where there's lots of kind of outreach happening, but not much tangible results. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, and I think it gets back to that original point around like AI hype. You know, people are seeing the highlights of AI, right? In the news, on TikTok, on Twitter. You see like this coolest, best examples of AI, and that hits like the mainstream narrative. And so, you know, we have a lot of clients who are coming into it expecting like the highlights, but they don't see, you know, it's not all, you know, it's not all perfection. It's not all like robots that are operating perfectly. You know, there's still a light touch to the SDR world that you need to like be able to build into properly. And like I am all, you know, very bullish on this. I think eventually, you know, all these companies will start building things that are very, very good. But yeah, like Christian is saying, you know, Reddit has a lot of the bad experiences of people who are just like, you know, using these products and they're expecting the best, you know, like repeated success. You know, 1,400 calls and 0 leads. They're not expecting that. They're expecting 1,400 calls and 1,400 successes when they're thinking AI. And I think that's the disconnect.
And you know, just kind of look at more, you know, stuff we've seen. Liz, there's a thread from Liz Wessel, who's a partner at First Round. She writes, it feels like once a month I hear yet of another startup that claims to be building AI sales reps, SDRs. They all get to 1 million ARR, impressive time, you know, 1 month, 3 months, and then stall out later due to insanely high, unsustainable churn. Curious which of these companies, you know, have that issue. And there's a lot of sort of people agreeing with it, saying, you know, they are seeing this sort of churn or industry matters. But, you know, I think a lot of times what's happening is that you'll notice in the language of these websites, they call these AIs like digital workers, and they have like an image of a person representing the AI. So I think companies are already kind of marketing generalized intelligence. Hey, I have this AI that's just as smart, almost as smart as a person. And, you know, the logic that us biological beings, us humans have is we have all these different, you know, we have common sense, we're inductive, we have abduction, we have all these different types of reasoning and all these types of experiences that like an AI doesn't have. You can give AI context, etc., but it's not at the point where it's a full-fledged worker, a competitor to a human in sort of really complex tasks. And you know, with that, I think, Phil, maybe it'd be good if we jumped into like how AI thinks today, because I think that kind of will explain the limitations of AI, what it's good at, what it's not good at, which would explain some of the success and the issues that these companies are having.
Yeah, it's actually magic. And we just put it inside of a box, and now we've got, you know, magic robots running around. But anyways, the explain like I'm 5 version of how AI is working is it's really good at guessing what the next words you want to say are based off of the words that you've already said. And so, you know, if we take that as our starting point in the conversation, right, it's basically a really good guessing machine. You know, how do you build a really good guessing machine? Well, you have to show it a lot of examples of word patterns and grammar patterns and sentence patterns and thought patterns and structures and different settings, different context. You know, you want to show it some business writing. You want to show it some maybe industry specific, maybe legal papers, scientific papers, newspapers, pull out YouTube transcripts to see how normal people talk, or Twitch stream transcripts to see how people normally converse back and forth between each other. And you get enough of this data and you take a guessing machine and you provide enough of that context, and now you've got a really good foundational data set to teach your magic box how to think. The big breakthrough with LLMs, the big breakthrough with LLMs is something called attention. But before we get to attention, there's 2 other big ideas with LLMs. One is called tokens, and the other is called transformation or transformers. And so when you have all this like data, what we want to do is we want to start grouping either words or groups of sentences together that are very common. And maybe if I have a phrase like the cat in the hat, right? And I want the robot to start guessing the words that I'm going to put in front of it. I could say the cat and then have it start to guess what the rest of the sentence is. If I just say the cat, then the robot could guess a bunch of different things. It could say the cat is stuck in the tree. The cat is brown. The cat is Garfield, is named Garfield. The cat in the hat, right? And so it comes up with a few different guesses on what it could be. If I say the cat in the blank, like 99%, the machine is going to say the cat in the hat, right? It's going to immediately know. And the reason it's going to know is because the cat in the blank, the cat in the is a token of words that makes sense contextually because it's seen that pop up so much in other literature that it was trained on, right? And all that other data that it's seen in the past, it saw the cat in the hat, right? And grouped that as one full token. And it says, okay, anytime I see this pattern, I know this is like the context around it, and I know what's going to come next. So if you take multiple tokens, right, and you say, okay, well, how do I combine different pairings of tokens, right? So maybe the cat in the hat by Dr. Seuss, right? So the cat in the hat is one token, by Dr. Seuss is another token, because those are really common groups of words. The transformer comes in and it says, okay, I've got trillions of pairings of words that I've grouped into tokens. Now let me figure out, how do I connect different tokens together that aren't normally there, right? How do I start guessing what should be next and what should make logical sense? And that's the cool part, is the transformer starts to make that guess. Okay. The really big advancement that we had was attention, which is basically not all words are created equal. Not all tokens are created equal. You might need a token, but it's not the important part of a sentence. It's not the important part of a paragraph or anything like that, but it's necessary for the language to happen. And so what it does is it weighs the tokens differently. Some tokens are more important for guessing what the next token should be. For instance, cat in the is a very important part of the phrase. You hear those three words, even though it's like not the whole thing, you can guess the cat, you can guess the token before it, you can guess that phrase, cat in the, you can guess the phrase after it, and you can guess the phrase after that phrase. And so you get just cat in the has so much more attention focused on it. It's weighted so much more that you're able to guess an entire set of 5 tokens by focusing on that, hyper focusing on that very important token. And so like that was the thing that kind of like set the world on fire, where these LLMs now can start making really accurate predictions very quickly, and that kind of like transformed the whole industry.
That makes a lot of sense, Phil. Thanks for explaining that. What I'd like to understand, and probably our audience wants to better understand as well, would be, what are the limitations of this system? And at the same time, why, despite its limitations, does it still feel that it's smarter than we are when it provides a response?
So if you think about it, right, like what's happening in like a statistical, on a bell curve, there is the most likely answers, right? And if you're using sort of this method to make decisions or to come up with answers, you're really good in sort of that center of the bell curve. But obviously, if you're dealing in a sales situation, you're going to deal with a lot of tail end items. And also, you're going to deal with a lot of things that seem contextually out of place for that specific circumstance, and yet for a human would be totally normal in a sales conversation. So I think this kind of combines to make an AI SDR interesting, but maybe not enough in a lot of circumstances.
Yeah, one of the things Christian likes to tell me a lot is like, or we like to have a lot of conversations about our edge cases, where we sit inside the main part of the bell curve, where 98% of the normal conversation occurs. But when you start throwing in those edge cases and you talk about having an LLM start looking at those edge cases, it starts to get confused a little bit. And it's like, I thought we were talking about this thing. And then now like this weird new context was introduced. Maybe it's important. Maybe I should focus my attention there because it's new and it seems relevant to the conversation. And it doesn't know when it needs to diverge from the normal conversation or when it needs to like stay the path. And so that's like a really weird part of having sales calls and trying to automate that with AI is like things don't always go down like a normal straight and narrow path.
I think it's also important to touch on hallucinations because I think that's another, item. I know something that we're always having to build guardrails around, but maybe Phil, you can explain sort of what an AI hallucination is and then sort of how it plays into this.
Yeah, a hallucination is basically like making the wrong guess, right? So we have this magic guessing machine, right? That's constantly guessing what the tokens around the context of words indicate the next word should be, and then guessing at that next word. Well, what happens if it guesses incorrectly on that next word? Or what happens if it weighs too heavily on the wrong token prior to, and now it says, okay, the next series of tokens is this other thing. And a hallucination is basically like a spiral case where it made one wrong guess, but it didn't self-correct. And then it made another wrong guess that compounds on that problem before. And eventually you get to the point where it's made a series of wrong guesses. And while structurally it's like English and it like makes sense structurally, it now becomes like wildly incorrect. I think the best examples of the hallucinations are the image generators a couple of years ago. I don't know if you guys saw that, where it was like generating like 4 fingers for OpenAI, and then people were freaking out, and then it like overshot, and then people ended up with like 20 fingers, and they're like, nope, that's not the right answer either. And then there's like a problem with thumbs. That was a big deal a couple of years ago. Literally just thumbs was a topic of conversation in the AI community, where people were like, how do we fix this? And I mean, they fixed it pretty quick, but it was a fun conversation.
It's a really important point you bring up with the hallucinations, but pulling away from the bad side of where AI could go wrong, I'd like to better understand where you see the successes. We're really stepping outside the hype here. So what is the actual success in AI, and where are you going to see some of the most positive impacts in a business sense?
One, I think on the AI, sort of on the outbound functionality for AI SDRs, right? I think there's actually a lot of use cases taking that same technology, that same outbound functionality, that actually has a lot of use cases for other things. So first and foremost, it's important to point out in the United States that if you can't just do 1 million outbound calls to random numbers, that actually is a pretty serious FTC violation with large, decent sized fines for each instance. But if you imagine sort of, let's say a stadium or a resort with a lot of existing customers that have opted into being contacted, an outbound AI could let them know about, hey, we have this, last year you attended, the AC/DC reunion tour. The AC/DC reunion tour is happening again in 3 months. You might want to consider buying tickets. And so I think it has a lot of interesting outbound functionality, but I think it has to be very targeted, very specific, and obviously not something that's going to run you afoul of U.S. law.
I think it's the context. Like, the more context in the conversation, the tighter the context can be, the better the outcome. And like Christian mentioned earlier, like we're constantly, like in our company, we're constantly building guardrails, trying to like add in the appropriate context, trying to add in the appropriate conversational prompts. Like, our clients can, one of our clients is in the hospitality space, right? And so we want to make sure, most of the questions that we receive are related to the specific business, and they're not asking. I had one caller calling in about like NBA playoff results, and I was like, why is this getting asked? But it's more important, to be able to say, hey, I don't know about the NBA. That's not, what I'm trying to do, and try to steer it back to where the context makes more sense for the robot.
Well, thank you, Kristen and Phil. I think that's gives us a lot of insight into where AI is going to be going. Phil, Kristen, I'd love to hear if each of you have a final thought before we continue on to the wrap up.
Something tangentially related, or maybe not related, but my comment for the week is just don't get a puppy. My wife recently got a puppy against my will. She said it's the family dog. I said any puppy you get would not be the family dog. My 4 and 2-year-old would not take care of it in any way, shape, or form. And of course, now I have a shadow. I have a dog that only likes me, and in fact doesn't like anyone else in my family. And so now I've inherited another child that I didn't ask for, that doesn't bear my resemblance. So that's, I don't think AI can kind of quite deal with that yet. Maybe Elon Musk has some robots that will take this off my plate if I do decent enough in life in 5-10 years. But by then, this puppy will be a dog, old, and all the damage from all these walks and other things, will have been done, and I will be in sort of the situation I'm in then.
Well, I am excited for the AI translation for dogs. That one will be a cool LLM to play around with. Because I don't know if it's right. Maybe there's a business there, raise 10 million selling an AI translator for dogs.
So to our audience, you now have the topic of our next episode. It's going to be the AI hype around pet translation. And I know there are a lot of dog lovers out there amongst you. Maybe a few of you are cat lovers as well. So stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll be discussing how your animal friends can also use ChatGPT to ask you when you're going to feed them, and where the next squirrel is, and whether or not they're going to get a belly rub.
Right? Yeah. It'll be great.